By reference to the Act of the British Parliament of June 2, 1821, it will be seen that the affairs of the North American British Fur Companies were in a fair way to defeat all British interests in America. To suppress these feuds among their own people became a matter of national importance and policy. To accomplish so desirable an object, Parliament, in the Act above referred to, extended the civil and criminal jurisdiction of Canada over all the territories of the Hudson's Bay Company, in the 13th article of the Act, and in the 14th, repealed all that was before taken away from that company, and confirmed absolutely all the rights supposed to have been given by the original charter, as follows. Section 14. And be it further enacted, that nothing in this Act contained shall be taken or construed to affect any right or privilege, authority, or jurisdiction, which the Governor and Company of Adventurers trading to Hudson's Bay are by law entitled to claim and exercise under their charter, but that all such rights, privileges, authorities, and jurisdictions, shall remain in as full force, virtue, and effect, as if this Act had never been made, anything in this Act to the contrary notwithstanding. This Act, however just it may have been considered, certainly embodied a large amount of national prejudice against the people of French or Canadian birth, in exempting the territory of the Hudson's Bay Company from its influence. It had a twofold effect, the one, to check feuds among British subjects, the other, to unite them in one vast Indian monopoly to license this united company to go forward with their Indian political arrangements unmolested to punish and dispose of all intruders upon their supposed, or asserted rights, as they might deem for the interest of their trade, which, according to the Charter of Charles II, bearing date May 2, 1670, they were at all times hereafter to be personable and capable in law, to have, purchase, receive, possess, enjoy, and retain lands, rents, privileges, liberties, jurisdiction, franchises, and here dediments of what kind, nature, or quality soever they be, to them and their successors. The whole trade, fisheries, navigation, minerals, etc., of the countries, are granted to the company exclusively, all other of the king's subjects being forbidden to visit, hunt, frequent, trade, traffic, or adventure therein, under heavy penalties, and the company is moreover empowered to send ships, and to build fortifications for the defense of its possessions, as well as to make war or peace with all nations or peoples not Christian, inhabiting those territories, which are declared to be henceforth reckoned and reputed as one of His Majesty's plantations or colonies in America, called Rupert's Land. It will be remembered that as early as 1818, a question arose between the United States and Great Britain, as to which was the rightful owner of the Oregon country. The Northwest Fur Company were the only subjects of Great Britain that had competed with the American fur companies in the discovery or trade of the country. To ignore that company altogether would weaken the British claim to Oregon by right of prior discovery and occupancy. Hence, by uniting the two companies under an ancient English charter, combining their united capital and numerical strength, discarding all doubtful subjects, and confirming the absolute power of their own British company, they could easily secure Oregon as British territory. The wisdom and effect of this policy will be developed as we proceed. By the third article of the Convention between the United States and Great Britain, signed October 20, 1818, it is agreed that any country that may be claimed by either party on the northwest coast of America, westward of the Stony Mountains, shall, together with its harbors, bays, and creeks, and the navigation of all rivers within the same, be free and open for the term of 10 years from the date of the signature of the present convention, to the vessels, citizens, and subjects of the two powers, it being well understood that this agreement is not to be construed to the prejudice of any claim which either of the two high contracting parties may have to any part of said country, nor shall it be taken to affect the claims of any other power or state to any part of the said country, the only object of the high contracting parties, in that respect, being to prevent disputes and differences among themselves. This convention secured at that time the Northwest Fur Company's existence in the country, by the act uniting the two British fur companies 3 years later. In 1821, the privileges here secured were transferred and confirmed to the Hudson's Bay Company, who at once took the most active and efficient measures to guard against any future competition, by assessing and setting apart 10 per cent on their capital stock, which was counted at £200,000, as a sinking fund for the special purpose of opposing all competition in the fur trade by land or water. The convention above referred to shows that Great Britain held a watchful eye over her fur traders in this distant country, and the act of her Parliament in 1821, that she was disposed, in a direct manner, to secure to her own people, as traders, the absolute sovereignty of the country. While Great Britain was protecting and strengthening her fur traders in North America, the American government was simply asserting its prior rights to the Oregon country, founded upon its discovery and subsequent purchase in what is termed the Louisiana Purchase, from France, the treaties and conventions only serving to encourage and strengthen the British claim, while they used their influence, capital, and power against all American competition and settlement in the country. In 1821, as was to be expected by the union of the two great British fur companies, under the license of the British Parliament, and absolute charter of Charles II, many of the servants, and especially such as were found favorable to the American fur traders, or violently opposed to the Hudson's Bay Company, were thrown out of employment. They naturally sought to continue their wild Indian trade and habits, and formed a company under the name of the Columbia Fur Company, extending their operations up the Mississippi, Missouri, and Yellowstone rivers. In 1826, they transferred their interests to Astor's Second North American Fur Company, of which John Jacob Astor was the head. This company appears to have been commenced or organized in connection with Mr. W. H. Ashley, in 1823, and under his direction extended its trade to the south and west, along the Platte River, and passed into the Rocky Mountains as far as Green River, being the first to discover its sources, making a successful trading expedition that year. In 1824, another expedition under Mr. Ashley explored the Rocky Mountains as far south as Salt Lake, and built a fort on the borders of a small lake, to which he gave his own name. In 1826, Mr. Ashley transported a 6-pound cannon to his establishment near Salt Lake, through what has since been termed Fremont's, or the South Pass of the Rocky Mountains, in a wagon. This establishment had in its employ over 100 men, and was remarkably successful and profitable to the partners. In 1826, Mr. Ashley sold all his interest to the Rocky Mountain Fur Company, composed of Smith, Jackson, and Subleith, who extended their trade into California, and as far north as the Umpqua River, in Oregon, where Smith and his party were met by a professedly friendly party of Indians, who murdered his men, seized his furs, and delivered them to a party of men sent by the Hudson's Bay Company, under Mr. John McLeod and Thomas McKay, to receive the furs and pay the Indians for their services as learned by the writer from eyewitnesses. During this same year, 1827, Major Pilcher, with 45 men, crossed the Rocky Mountains, and, in 1828-9, traversed the western portion of them as far north as Fort Colville. This fort had been established, and farming operations commenced, in 1825. This party of Major Pilcher were all cut off but 2 men, besides himself. His furs, as stated by himself to the writer, found their way into the forts of the Hudson's Bay Company. In 1828, the brig Oahe, Captain Dummenses, and the schooner Cowrie, Captain Thompson, entered and remained nearly a year in the Columbia River, trading with the Indians. They were owned in Boston. In 1830, the British ship Isabel was lost on Sand Island, the second known to have been wrecked on the bar, or in attempting to enter the river. The crew were all saved, and it was the opinion of the company at Vancouver that, had the crew remained with the ship, no great loss would have been sustained. In 1832, Captain Bonneville, of the United States Army, on furlough, started, with over 100 men, on an expedition into the Rocky Mountains. He crossed the mountains, and reached the Walla Walla Valley, on the Columbia River, but, through the influence of the Hudson's Bay Company, his men were nearly all induced to leave him, so that he was obliged to abandon his property, and his expedition was a total failure, except the little scientific knowledge of the country gained by it. To charge the failure of Captain Bonneville directly to the Hudson's Bay Company would not be strictly true, but their great influence over the Indians was sufficient to prevent them from furnishing his party with food or horses, while he was within reach of their forts. Hence, many of his men became dissatisfied, and left him, till his party became too weak to effect their return to the States with their valuable furs and property. These eventually were lost, or fell into the hands of the Indians, and through them, his furs reached the Hudson's Bay traders' establishments. This same year, 1832, Captain Nathaniel Wyeth, of Massachusetts, started on an exploring expedition to the mouth of the Columbia River, with a view of establishing a permanent trade in the Oregon country. He traveled across the continent and gathered all the information requisite for the undertaking, and returned to Boston in 1833, and in 1834, having completed his arrangements, chartered the brig May Dacker, and dispatched her with his own, and the goods of the Methodist Mission, for the Columbia River. The same year, some Flathead Indians, from a tribe in the midst of the Rocky Mountains, went to St. Louis, and, through Mr. Catlin, an American artist, made known their object, which was to know something more of the white man's God and religion. Through the representations of these Indians, the Methodist Episcopal Society in the United States established their missions in Oregon, and the American Board sent their missionaries among the Nez Perces, which, as will be seen, was the commencement of the permanent settlement of the country. It appears from the facts, briefly stated, that there had been 11 different trading expeditions and companies, besides the Northwest and Hudson's Bay companies, that had sought for wealth by making fur trading establishments in Oregon. All of them, including the Northwest and Hudson's Bay companies, have retired from it, but the American missionaries are residents of the country, and their influence and labors are felt, notwithstanding other influences have partially supplanted and destroyed the good impressions first made upon the natives of the country by them. Still civilization, education, and religion, with all the improvements of the age, are progressing, and the old pioneer missionaries and settlers that were contemporary with them, with a few exceptions, are foremost in every laudable effort to benefit the present and rising generation. In the month of March, 1833, a Japanese junk was wrecked near Cape Flattery, in the then territory of Oregon, and all on board, except 3 men, were lost. Those 3 were received by Captain McNeill on board the British ship Llama, taken to Vancouver, and then sent to England. Reverend Mr. Parker gives this, and another similar wreck on the Sandwich Islands, as evidence of the origin of the natives of those countries. But we give it for another object. The 3 Japanese were taken to England, and, during their stay, learned the English language, were sent back to Macau, and became the assistant teachers of Mr. Gutzlaff, the English missionary at that place, and were the means of opening their own country to missionary and commercial relations with other nations. Captain Wyeth, with Revs. Jason and Daniel Lee, Cyrus Shepherd and P.L. Edwards, the first missionary party, together with Dr. Nuttall, a naturalist, and J.K. Townsend, an ornithologist, sent out by a literary society in Philadelphia, all under the escort furnished by Captain Wyeth, crossed the mountains and reached the plain formed by the Portneuf and Snake rivers. At their junction Captain Wyeth stopped, and established Fort Hall, while the missionaries and scientific men of his party, in company with an Englishman by the name of Captain Stewart, and a party of Hudson's Bay traders, under the direction of Mr. McLeod and McKay, proceeded to Fort Nez Perces, present name, Wallula. Thence they traveled in Hudson's Bay bateaus to Vancouver. Captain Wyeth established his post on the Snake River, by erecting a stockade of logs, and quarters for his men, and then proceeded to the lower Columbia to receive his goods, which arrived in the Maydacker, Captain Lambert, from Boston, about the time he reached Fort William, on what is now known as Sauvy's Island, a few miles below the mouth of the Multnomah River, now called the Willamette. Reverend Mr. Lee and party made their first location about 60 miles from the mouth of the Willamette, near what is now called Wheatland, 10 miles below Salem. Captain Wyeth received his goods, and commenced his trading establishment, but found that, notwithstanding he was personally treated by the principal officers of the Hudson's Bay Company with great courtesy, yet it was evident that every possible underhanded and degrading device was practiced, both with the Indians and with his men, to destroy, as much as was possible, the value and profits of his trade. In the spring and summer of 1835 he supplied his Fort Hall establishment with goods. During the year 1835, the Hudson's Bay Company erected a temporary post about 12 miles up the Boise River, designed to counteract and destroy as much as possible the American fur trade established by Captain Wyeth, who continued his efforts less than 3 years, and, having lost of the 200 men who had been in his employ 160, as stated to Reverend Samuel Parker, and finding himself unable to compete with this powerful English company, he accepted Dr. McLaughlin's offer for his establishments, and left the country in 1836. In 1835, the American Board of Commissioners for Foreign Missions sent Reverend Samuel Parker and Dr. Marcus Whitman to explore the Oregon country, with a view of establishing missions among the Indians west of the Rocky Mountains. These 2 missionaries reached the American Rendezvous on Green River, in company with the Rocky Mountain Fur Company's traders, under the direction of Captain Strips and Fitzpatrick. From the American Rendezvous Mr. Parker continued his explorations in company with, and under the protection of the Nez Perce Indians, till he reached Old Fort Walla Walla, now called Wallula. Thence he continued in canoes to Vancouver, while Dr. Whitman returned to the United States to procure associates to establish